My name is Carlton Cartwright. I'm the Executive Director for Veterans Memorial and Multicultural Histories Incorporated. And today is April 1st, 2025. We're here at Riviera Beach Preparatory Achievement Academy. And I have some of my students with me. I've got Javante, I got Amari, I got Jamelia, Khalees, did I say it correctly?
Yes.
Right, and say it louder. Sequesta, Armani, and Alexis. Okay, good. All right, and sir, what is your name?
My name is Darryl Patrick.
Okay, Mr. Patrick. And where were you born? When's your birthday?
12/24/58.
Where were you born?
Here, West Palm Beach.
West Palm?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
St. Mary's
How-
Hospital, right down the street.
What year did you go into the military?
1988,
What branch did you serve in?
United States Navy.
Why did you choose the Navy?
Well, I wanted to do some traveling. My mom put me on a bus one time when I was young, sent me all the way up to Tallahassee, and I just enjoyed the trip. So, and all the different little cities I saw, and I just had a wanderlust ever since then to just, see different things and travel. So, I was thinking about the Marine Corps, but they weren't talking about doing the kind of traveling I wanted to do. But they said that, join the Navy and see the world. So that was pretty much the main thrust.
You thought you'd be able to travel the most with the Navy versus the other branches?
Yeah. Plus the Navy mission. When I talked to somebody, I kind of looked at all of them. I looked at all of them except the Air Force.
Okay.
I didn't look at the Air Force too deep. But I dealt with the Army. As a matter of fact, I took a test ahead of time to see what kind of placement I would have as far as aptitude is concerned. They were telling me I aced the test to be an officer candidate, but the types of jobs they were talking about didn't appeal to me. I didn't want just to go in and be commissioned and whatnot. I wanted to do something that I felt comfortable with and I would be of service, and to do something that was extremely relevant. I wanted to know what was going on everywhere. I didn't want to just do one specific thing. And when I saw the Navy job that they offered me, I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That's what I want.
What were you doing prior to going into the military?
I graduated from Florida A&M University.
Oh, so you had a college degree?
That's
already?
correct. Then my mom died at right about that time. It was a matter of fact in my senior year at FAM. So so appreciate it. So I have friends in California, and they invited me to come out there to get my head right, and that's where I joined the military a few years later.
Okay.
So yeah, I went in with a college degree. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so let me get this straight. So you graduated from FAMU?
Florida A&M University.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I'm a rattler.
okay, gotcha. What year did you graduate?
1982.
Okay. But you didn't go into service until 88?
Right.
Right.
Like I said, my mom died right after, so
Right.
I was kind of working at home here in Riviera Beach,
Now, I'm just,
trying to get my head right. So there was a lot of stuff going on personally in
Uh-huh.
between that time frame.
got it.
And my mom never wanted me to go into. I would have done it directly from the, once I went to FAM, but my mom and my parents didn't want me to go join the military at the time. So that was something I wanted to do early, but I wanted to respect their wishes and get a degree. So when I got out, and my mind was kind of thinking about what was going on with that, I wasn't thinking about, going in and doing anything other than what I wanted to do initially. So it was just following that dream. Because I was doing pretty good in California with a company out there, but the company folded due to some malfeasance, things of that nature. And I just said, you know what, let me just go and do what I really wanted to do. And now my mom's no longer here. I fulfilled her wishes for me, for my life, to get a degree. So now I could go ahead and do that.
Gotcha. Okay. And you still live in, what city do you live in now?
Riviera Beach.
Riviera Beach.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. So you in the Navy. So where was basic training?
Basic training was in Great Lakes.
Great Lakes.
Yeah.
How long was it?
Great Mistakes, as we call it. About about 9 weeks long.
9 weeks?
Yeah, boot camp was pretty long. Yeah.
Pretty rigorous?
Yeah. I didn't think the Navy was going to be as hard as it was. But
Really?
but the Navy and Marine Corps had the same kind of core values. So a lot of the things that we did was what the Marines were doing.
Right.
So.
You had Marine training instructors?
Sometimes?
Yeah,
Sometimes. Yeah. But most of the time we had, pretty much Navy guys that were in those areas of the military that do a lot of drill, like master at arms, people like that. They like Navy police. So those kind of guys, and they work with the Marines. And as a matter of fact, a lot of things I did when I first came in, I worked a lot with the Marine Corps. Yeah.
Okay, so back to that 9 weeks.
Right.
Were there any casualties in basic training? Anybody get hurt? Anybody?
Yeah, we did have a few. I mean, people had, it was kind of physically demanding. So we had issues with people having broke legs, fingers like that. I think maybe somebody committed suicide at some point. Yeah, so.
And
that
a
was
lot
an
of
issue.
pressure and stress?
Oh, yeah. You try to.
Sound like it was traumatic.
Yeah, well, they try to force a lot of different ideas and concepts on you at a time when your mind's not really into that type of discipline. When you're waking you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're running outside and, in a shirt and some shorts.
Right.
Running, 3 miles and stuff like that. So it was kind of hard, and you got to be places on time, and they're forcing a lot of indoctrination on you at the same time. So
Very
it was kind of
demanding.
interesting. Oh yeah, definitely.
Gotcha. Okay, so Great Lakes, you were there for 9 weeks?
Correct.
And what about your MOS or your AIT school?
My A school, when you come out of basic training, you go to a school based on your ASVAB score, stuff like that. So I scored high enough to get accepted at OSA school, which stands for Operations Specialist A school. So, and because I was a assistant, what they call R, we have the 2 top leaders was R Park and AR Park, which is basically the assistant or the regimental training chief. So I came as the AR Park, so that gave me accelerated advancement to E3. So when I got out of that, I went to to OSA school, graduated from that with the same kind of acknowledgement with accelerated advancement. But what I got out of boot camp got me into A school under the accelerated advancement program.
By the way, you separated in 2011?
Correct.
How many total years did you do?
23.
So you retired?
Yes.
Good, congratulations.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so what did you go to, first of all, what did you get your bachelor's degree in from FAMU?
Journalism, media, and graphics.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what was your AIT? What did you train in your MOS?
Yeah.
What was your...
Operations specialist? Okay, well, the operations specialist is basically the person on board that works in Combat Information Center. And what we're tasked with doing is acquiring all the information that's needed to do any type of combat operations in the military, and disseminate, absorb it, break it down, evaluate it, and then disseminate it to the people on the ship that need to know that kind of critical information. So it was in the nerve center of the ship, and we dealt directly with the captain, the officers, and most of the other specialists that did things like fire missiles off. We also talked to the Marines as they hit the beach. That's a controlled evolution from the ship. So I work there, and we're actually talking to the Marines as they're driving the ship right up, their command ships right up on the beach and going to their objective. And we also control their aircraft. I was a AIC, which is an air intercept controller, which we actually talk to the pilots to get them from the ship to the threat, and we let them know what kind of threat they're looking at, because their radar only goes out about 20, 35 miles, but we had access to sensors that would go out 250 miles or so.
Wow.
So we could see the big picture before they got there. So for us to give them that critical combat, or that tactical information. Like, you got a group of 4 aircraft coming in stacked, 10,000 feet apart, or they're in a diamond formation, or they're in whatever type of formation is necessary. That allows them, because they normally go out in teams. I'm sure people have seen Top Gun and all that. But the guy that's talking to Maverick is a guy like me in CIC with the AIC qualification.
Gotcha. What kind of ship were you on?
I was on mostly big deck amphibians, which are basically aircraft carriers for the Marines, and the SEAL teams were with us a lot. And I also trained with the SEALs for different operations as well.
Okay, so how long was that tech school? How long was that?
Yeah, OSA school?
Mhm.
OSA school was about another 9 weeks.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And where was that? Was that on a ship or was
No,
that
no,
on
no,
land?
that was on land. That was up in Virginia, in
Where?
Dam Neck, right on the beach,
Okay.
Virginia Beach, Virginia.
So-
But it's a Dam Neck. It's called Fleet Training Center, Dam Neck, Virginia Beach. If you want to look at
What
it.
base were you assigned to while you were there?
That was the base.
That was the base.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So we was
All
on
right.
board there.
Okay, so your first tour was on an aircraft carrier, and how long was that?
No, it was on a ship called a landing platform dock, which is basically a helicopter and AV-8 Bravo aircraft carrier. Plus, we took the AAVs and the LCACs and LCUs and different craft like that the Marines use to get to the beach, because they did use different types of ships and small boats and things like that to get to the beach. So we packed all of that on board. We had about 500 or 600 personnel aboard, but when the Marines came on board, that was about another 900 to 1,400 people. So we would carry about 2,000 people. It was a smaller big deck amphib, but I went to the bigger one at my next tour.
Okay, well, on the first tour,
Right.
were there any casualties?
Yeah, I had a couple of guys commit suicide in my department. Like I said, it's a lot of stress, and at the time, at that particular command, the Gulf War had broke out, so we was a part of Desert Shield, Desert
That's what I was gonna ask
Storm.
you. Are you also
Yeah.
a combat veteran?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Desert Shield,
Can
Desert
you
Storm.
tell us about that?
Well, we actually rolled up on in Kuwait, and we actually did operations in Kuwait. And I was a part of the SEAL detachment. And, well, to kind of backtrack on that part, it's a little complicated because I wasn't actually SEAL. I want to make that clear. But at the time, there were, I was a part of, I was the team leader of a 2-platoon detachment that was sent out to do different SEAL jobs. So we were sent to do, we went to do certain skills that the SEALs did, like, how to, board the ship, how to climb on board a moving craft, jump out of helicopters, how to, actually the tactical things you do to go ahead and attack a threat, that kind of thing. We were trained to do those things, but we didn't do the parachuting and the diving, but we did all the other things that the SEALs did. So when the SEALs came on board, we detached with them and went along and did certain things that they did. So during the Gulf War, we went out and went with them to do certain things in Kuwait and places like that before the actual battle, which was mostly aircraft and things like that, started. So yeah, we did operations with the SEALs. So.
Okay, so what things did you do? Did you engage the enemy, or were you setting up some kind of operation, or can you talk about it?
There was no. That's a good question.
Right.
Can I talk about it?
This classification, I don't know if it's still classified.
Yeah. There are certain classified things that we did that I can't get into, but we
Got it.
supported the Kuwaiti Navy
Mhm.
and their forces in dealing with the threat that they had. So,
Okay.
I could tell you about some things we did that would be called a combat operation. Like, there was a couple of embassies that needed evacuation of the United States, personnel at specific embassies we had overseas. So they would send us in to do stuff like that. So that would be considered a combat operation, because you're going in, guns hot, that kind of thing. You can get shot at and taken out, blown up, all of that kind of good stuff. So you could call that a combat operation.
Were there any casualties during those operations?
Not during those operations. We had most of the casualties I know about are casualties of dealing with the stress of being in the military in those types of environments, because it was very stressful at that particular time in the military, especially in the Navy, because with our ship, we were deployed a lot, and we repeat deployed a lot. So it put a lot of stress on the personnel to be able to cope with all of that, plus not being able to see your family. You got young people on there who aren't used to that kind of stress, so a lot of them couldn't handle it, and they did things to take their own lives.
Right.
So yeah, that was hard to deal with that because I lost a few friends for that. But never in combat. That was a good thing.
And you weren't drafted, you enlisted, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand.
All right. So, tours again. So
Tours.
that's next tour was where?
Next tour, I went directly to. My command requested that I extend my tour on that first tour, so I spent the extra year there.
That's what I was wondering.
That's
How long
my
was that
expertise.
total for? A year and a half?
No.
The first one?
The first tour are like 4 or 5 years. It's supposed to be a 4-year tour, but mine was 5.
Wow.
Because they asked me to extend based on my experience.
Did
Like
you
I said,
in
I
Kuwait?
was. Yeah.
Okay.
Kuwait. We went up into dealt with the Kuwaiti Navy. Bahrain was one of our biggest allies there, so we did a lot of work with them. We even had some interactions with Iran at the time. A few things happened there. There was some battle damage on some of the ships out there, so we had to. I was a part of a Navy Marine Corps team that was tasked with neutralizing that threat. We were trained to go and make sure that the areas that we were going in were free of mines or swimmers that might have detonating devices on, that type of thing. So, and that's when I got my first military award. I got a Navy commendation from the commander of that whole operation, and we called it the Central Command, CENTCOM. So that's my first award, leading a joint Navy Marine Corps team to do that type of thing.
And what was your rank at that time?
I was E5.
E5.
All right.
Okay. So what was that title?
OS2, or Petty Officer Second Class.
Okay.
But the thing about the Navy was they gave you as much responsibility as you could handle. So in other words, you could be an E5, but you're doing E7 or even chief or even officer type responsible jobs. So that was a great thing. That's what I loved about the Navy as well, because I did a lot of different things that was not what you would normally do in any other branch of the service. Like the Air Force and the Army and the Marine Corps did not allow that kind of leeway for their lower ranking members to be involved with such high profile and dangerous positions. Because being the Delta leader of that team that worked with the SEALs, that was hardcore. That was normally a job that an officer would do, or at least the chief. So
it was a leadership opportunity.
Oh yeah. That was
Gotcha.
the best part of it.
Okay, so the second tour was where?
The second tour was at I went to back to Fleet Plant Training Center, Dam Neck, as an instructor.
Oh.
So now that I'm there, I'm shaping the minds of the
And how
young
long were
cats
you
that come
there?
out there. About 3 years.
Got it.
Yeah.
And tell us about it.
So, some of the things I accomplished there, well, it was kind of like boot camp too, because like you had a regular boot camp, and when you went to A school, it was like the first 4 weeks of a 12-week program were basically in an environment where you're still in boot camp. So the first four week of class was the most intensive weeks. Those are the weeks I taught, from week 1 to 4. But I also marched the students to class, marched them back, took them to training, took them to PT, discipline, all of that kind of good stuff was done by the instructors. So it was a multifaceted job.
Right, so you had a full supervisory position.
Definitely.
Sounds like
Definitely.
Nice.
And some of the awards I got there was, well, if it's not pertinent, I won't.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, well, some of the awards I got there, I was awarded. I was an instructor of the year, instructor of the quarter for 4 consecutive quarters. That normally leads into instructor of the year process, and I did that.
Congratulations.
Then petty officer of the quarter, I did that 4 more times. So instructor of the quarter and petty officer of the quarter are 2 different things. The instructor is just for the instructing work. The petty officer of the quarter is the work overall. Like I was a part of security as well, and I had, and the qualifications I got while I was working with the SEAL team and the Marines at the previous command, allowed me to have a large large role when I got to Dam Neck as an instructor. So that's where I got the Pit Officer Quarter thing for it. And I won that award for the entire base, which is a base full of 700 instructors total. So that was a pretty good pool of people to win that award in.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you.
And so that was a 3-year tour, right?
That was a three-year tour.
So where was your next tour?
My
Were
next-
there any casualties during that 3 years? Again?
No casualties other than just stuff like bruised ankles or legs, that kind of
No
thing. I had that
fatalities.
kind of stuff. No fatalities.
During the training school?
That's correct.
Beautiful. Next one.
USS Nassau, LHA 4. This was in Norfolk, Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
I was there for another 5 years. That's where I made chief. I went there and made E6 as soon as I got there. When I made E6, I was one of only 10 E6s, people E5 and above in my E5 that were qualified to go. Because in other words, when you try to go to the next rank, you have to not only, it's a qualification test you take, and you have to score in a certain percentage to even get there. So I scored in the top less than 1% because they only took 10 out of the 1,400 people that actually took the test and qualified for that. So, and out of that 10, what the Navy will do is pay in increments. So the first increment is the top third, second increment is the second third, and the rest come after that. So out of 10, I must have been one of the top. They don't tell you exactly what number you are, but I must have been one of the top 2 or 3 because I got paid immediately, and that's the first increment. So that's the top scores that particular test. I got paid immediately, so I must have been 1, 2, or 3. So that was hard to get into that. So at this particular command, I'm now the LPO, which is the leading petty officer. So I'm the leading E6 in my division. So I'm the guy that actually shapes the division and what we're going to do. So the word will come up from higher authority about what we're going to do. My particular division, OI division, was the largest division in operations, which was the largest division on the ship out of 10 large divisions. So I had the most people in my division, and we were involved with the Kosovo conflict. I actually was a AIC by this particular time.
Were you in the Mediterranean?
Yeah. So we was in the Adriatic, stationed up there between Italy and I guess that area near Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Okay, and I didn't get to ask you on the first tour, what body of water were you? What's adjacent to Kuwait?
During my first tour?
Black Sea? Yeah.
Kuwait? No, that's the Persian Gulf.
Persian Gulf, okay.
Yeah. So we went through the Red Sea, Persian Gulf, went through the Med first, crossed the Atlantic, went through the Mediterranean, spent a lot of time up in there, went to Israel, all that. Then went through the Red Sea, came back up through the Persian Gulf, and that was pretty much the tour. That's pretty much my most of the tour I did on the first tour. Although we did go through the different parts of Africa because we went in and evacuated some U.S. citizens out of Liberia. If people don't know about Liberia, that was the country in Africa that a lot of the slaves, when they were freed, they were a lot of them went back to Africa, and Liberia was the area the country they went to. So we liberated some U.S. citizens from there.
Wow. Okay. All right. Next tour.
Next tour again, Nassau. So you want me to finish that one?
Yes, please.
Or go on to the next
Finish.
one. Okay. Well, with Nassau, we did operations, like I said, in Kosovo. We also did some things in the Persian Gulf again. At the time, there was another conflict going on at the time that was in Rwanda. I don't know if people watched that movie.
I saw it.
You know what
Hotel.
I'm talking about? Yeah, I can't remember the name, but
I think it was Hotel Rwanda.
That's right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Hotel Rwanda. So we were involved in some of that, but we didn't. But the U.S. Navy didn't get involved at all, and that was due to a lot of different things that came up. Politics, exactly. Right. And
what was the issue about Hotel Rwanda?
Well, the issue was there were two warring factions in Rwanda, the Houthis and the Tutus, and one faction was massacring the other.
Right.
So at the time, genocide was going on. So at the time, the military was trying to do two things at once. We were dealing with, I was giving operational reports to the commanders every day. My department did that. So I was the first class that was dealing with those types of reports. And those op reps were covering the conflicts that we had in Kosovo, or the Bosnia-Herzegovina deal, and the situation that's going on in Rwanda. The United States government elected to not help the people in Rwanda, and we went and dealt with the people in Kosovo. So that Rwanda situation was the aftermath of us pulling out and not helping those Rwandans. So we had intelligence pictures that couldn't be seen by any of the other or the regular people that talked about all the different, like I saw a picture of bodies on two sides of on both sides of the street that was stacked with, double stacked with bodies all the way down. And I don't think anybody in the civilian community has ever seen those pictures. But so that was going on with that. And also another thing that we got involved with, back to my first command, before I left, I don't know if you saw the movie Black Hawk Down, but we were involved with something with that. The SEALs were involved with going in with an operation called Restore Hope in Somalia. And when I was on my first command dealing with the SEAL team, they went out on a mission to take out one of the primary threats that the movie Black Hawk Down was dealing with. So they were on a mission that I was dealing with. I was working with them, where they were about to take that guy out. Now, had they done so, Black Hawk Down, that movie might have never happened, because that particular warlord might not have made it to do the things he did to cause that thing to happen. Wow. So that was another wild thing that happened with the SEAL team, because a lot of the SEALs came back to me and were saying, look, I'm thinking about getting the hell up out of here. They assigned us to go on this mission. When we get there, they can't make a decision to say, okay, take this guy out. So that was kind of wild. But that was just a note about the prior command. But getting back to the Nassau, after we went with the Bosnia-Herzegovina deal, we pretty much were involved with a lot of anything that dealt with mopping up in the Persian Gulf. There were still conflicts going on with that. We were always involved with those things. Like I said, we went into Israel a lot. Israel had a few little skirmishes. But other than that, it was just a good command as far as bringing my people up. I had a lot of guys that did a lot of great things, and we did a lot of different things as far as my guys became, we became the top division on the ship as far as promotions concerned, as far as wars. Like, we was winning all of the sale of this, sale of that. I won sale of the quarter so many times that I was demotivating the other guys in the other departments. They're like, well, we know we're going to give it to OS1 Patrick, so let's lie. It got like that. So, but that was a good period as far as bringing other people up, because I had a lot of guys, and I had a suicide happen in that situation before I got to be the head. As I lifted the morale up of the guys that was there, they went on to do a lot of monumental things that a lot of them never thought they could do. And that was pretty much my specialty. I was able to go in and talk to people who were troubled and help them solve whatever problems they've got, and solve it in ways that they never thought they could do. And I think that's what our youth need today, being able to deal with their own issues on their own, without having to rely on anybody else, and trusting yourself, believing in yourself, to say, look, I see that particular job over there, and I want to do that, and I can do that. And just the wisdom to say to yourself, I can, with anything you do, is important at the student level or at the young level, when you're just trying to figure out who you are and what your identity is going to be. So I did a lot of good things there. And again, working with Marines was solid, because there were a lot of different things I did to make sure that they were involved with what the military did, or what the Navy did. And I was running the ship self-defense force, which is the force of Navy Marine Corps personnel that actually went out and did all of the shore patrols and any evolutions that dealt with security or any types of tactical things that we had to do. So I was the only E6 in the Navy that was able to do that particular job, because it's normally an officer's job. Again, like I said, sometimes the Navy would allow you to do that. And I was also qualified to be duty operations and duty security, which is something that was unprecedented at that particular command.
Right. Keep going, you good.
Okay. So, along with that, one particular instance came up where I had one of the Marine Corps, the commander of the Marine Corps detachment that was on board, stated that they were going to pull their forces away from the ship self-defense force, which I was running, and I couldn't put together a normal or a satisfactory team to do the things that we had to do, like defend the ship, go do the shore patrol. And the Marines were basically just saying they're not going to participate anymore. So I took it upon myself to go out and look at the Navy regulations and make sure that in the Navy regulations, it stated that the Marine Corps shall provide X amount of personnel for this particular evolution. And when I found that, I went to the Marine Corps. I went to my officer, my superior officer, and told him what was going on. And I said, okay, well, somebody's got to go tell that officer, tell the Marine commandant that we got to get these guys in. So my lieutenant of base said, well, hey, what's one? You was handling that. Why don't you go in it? So for me, I was like, okay, well, you're gonna send me into the lion's den with pork chop underwear on. But so I went ahead and did it anyway. And I went up there and I said, look, sir, I need this to happen and blah, blah, blah. And he looked at it and he was like, well, you got a lot of balls coming up in my stateroom here talking about, give me some personnel. I said, yes, sir. I said, but everything speaks for itself right there. And he said, okay, well, I have a detachment out there at 0700 tomorrow morning. I was like, really? It was that easy? But, I had all my documents in a row. He couldn't dispute it. So first thing, I'm out there, my khakis on, and I go out there, and my camis on, and because we were all basically the same uniform. They had camis on, we had camis. The Navy side that was on the SSDF. So we went out there at 7 o'clock, and sure enough, they were out there, and they saw what the guy that was running them said, hey, you always one, Patrick? They got Pop Tall, detachment so and so and so from Marine Corps MU 222. Reporting as ordered, sir. And I was like, okay, roger that. So they came on and augmented everybody, and everything went on according to plan from the rest of that. But that was a very successful tour, and that tour I made chief on, and I was there for only 5 years. Then I went to my next command.
To where?
USS Lake Erie. That was out in Hawaii.
Okay. How long was that tour?
That tour was 3 years, too.
Okay. And
by the time I could, by the time, say again?
What did it entail?
I was on a cruiser at this time, and now my first two commands were on big deck amphibs. So now I've gone to a cruiser, which is basically a missile shooter. There are no more Marines on board, so we're just doing regular Navy stuff like shooting Tomahawks, SM-2 missiles, and that particular command was the Navy. Basically, it was the precursor of the Space Force. So what we were doing was using satellites to link with the ship as we fire missiles off, and the satellites that were out there in space would give us the telemetry we needed to intercept a missile like 1,000 miles away from the launch point. So that was a very sophisticated job that particular ship was doing, and that's all we were tasked to do. So when we went on deployments, it wasn't for 6 months like everybody else did. We would do 3 or 4, do our test runs, go see. That's why I went to see the other side of the world that I wanted to see, which is the Orient. So I went to see Singapore, Thailand, Japan, Hong Kong, places like that. Whereas the other commands were on the other side of the house is when I did everything in the Mediterranean and Atlantic. So that was a pretty good, decent command. And like I said, I made chief there, so it was very successful. Got married at that particular point too. My son was born when I was transferring. I re-enlisted there, and I re-enlisted at the Arizona Memorial. And I had my son with me, and we took pictures up against that wall, the mural on the back, with all 1,177 people that died. So that was a good experience as well.
Where was that? The wall?
In the Arizona Memorial. You know,
Okay,
when
gotcha.
Pearl Harbor happened, when they sunk all those battleships, Arizona was a memorial, and they erected a memorial on top of the hulk of the ship that was sunk.
Wow.
So they just erected a memorial right over that, and I went and did my re-enlistment ceremony there. So that was a
Next tour.
quality thing. My next tour, I went back to being an instructor, but this time I'm at the Center for Surface Combat Systems in San Diego, and that we were servicing all of the combat. We serviced all of the ships that had combat systems on board, which was pretty much every ship out there that fired missiles or did anything tactical, and we were servicing the entire. We basically did things all over the Navy. So our detachment was the top one in the U.S. Naval training forces that we had, because we went over on the East Coast as well, because most of those detachments were not as sophisticated and had the type of instructor, the quality of instructors that we had there. So we would go and do things on the East Coast. We did things on, we did a tour at Bath, Maine. At one point went to Mayport in Florida. But we did most of our stuff in San Diego or Washington State, up around Bremerton, that same area where that movie back in the day, An Officer and a Gentleman,
Yeah.
was filmed. So we did a lot of stuff there, and at that particular command, I was the #1 chief of 24 at least out of 2 of the 3 years I was there. I was the #1 chief there. I was also the learning standards officer, which is another senior enlisted or O2 and above billet, where I was the senior chief in charge of all of the instruction that was done. So I had to correct any instruction that was done, or I was normally the guy in charge of the mission documents that we took to whatever command to do our trainings and things of that nature. So I was versed on. I was the most qualified there as well. So I was qualified in every type of combat system the Navy had, and we had about 5 or 6, like ACDS, which is Advanced Combat Direction System, the Ship Self-Defense System, Aegis system, which is the one that most people know about, that it's kind of like having a ship-wide. Well, it has about 250 miles of range, but it's not an oscillating system. It's just a system that has these arrays that are like sensors on Star Trek, you know.
Gotcha.
So in other words, it didn't have anything rotating, that kind of thing. So that was the most advanced system we had outside of the CEC system, which is the Cooperative Engagement Capability System, which allowed us to connect with the Navy, the Marines, the Air Force, and everybody can see the same picture. We had pictures where I could see the number of troops as they're going to a threat and things like that. So that system was pretty sophisticated, and I was qualified, the most qualified to teach all of those. So.
How many more tours did you have after this one?
2.
2 more?
All right.
Can we need to go ahead, please?
All right, the 2 more after that, once I left the Center for Surface Combat Systems, I went to the USS Macon Island, which was the first hybrid big deck amphib. So I was a plank owner for that. So that was a plank owner is basically they're the initial crew that was stationed there. So in other words, when the ship was being built, we moved to Pascagoula, Mississippi, and then drove the ship through the Gulf of Mexico, around South America, back up around to San Diego, where our permanent duty station was going to be located.
Okay.
So that particular command, like I said, was a hybrid. So, all the other vessels are steam vessels, if you believe it or not. But this particular vessel was steam.
Okay.
The engines were run on steam.
Uh-huh.
That way you don't have to have a whole lot of fuel. Most of the fuel we would take on those types of ships were for the aircraft and and the other ships.
Okay.
But this particular ship could go on steam, not steam, but electricity and the steam engines we had. So it was a hybrid. We could switch over. So it was a unique command to be on. So then after I left there, like I said, after we got back to San Diego, we didn't do any more traveling, but we traveled all the way around South America, the East Coast, down to Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. Went there. That was nice. Went through the straits down there by Antarctica.
Right.
Went through there where you can see Antarctica and you can see the land mass over there. And then we went around the other side, went to Peru, saw Machu Picchu, is that city up in the mountains that a lot of people don't have ever. It's a pretty historic city that's still up in the mountains
Right.
in Peru. And then we came around through Mexico and places like that before we got to San Diego.
And the last tour?
Last tour was the USS Halsey, which was also in San Diego, and that was a destroyer. So that was my last command. That's where I retired.
Okay. So after you told us about your tour in the Middle East.
Right.
So the rest of these were basically stateside.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
Any
and I went to Hawaii. That's all.
Right. Got
So yeah.
Were there any casualties? Anybody get hurt?
There was some casualties on my last command. Somebody in my department, a female, jumped overboard. About 6 months before I got out, which is about 4 months prior to us. 4 months prior to when I retired. So we were still on a cruise in the Persian Gulf.
Okay.
And she jumped overboard in the Gulf.
Wow.
And it took us about 2 or 3 days to find her body. So that was close to my heart. She was somebody that worked with me, and
Wow.
I had to do up all of the arrangements, made sure her parents got to the ship and all that, and made sure that her memorial service was done well. So, yeah, but that was a casualty that we had to deal with.
Overall, how was the food while you were in the service?
Well, between MREs and shipwide food surprisingly was pretty good because we had pretty good cooks, and that's their only job, was to be cooks.
Right.
They do a few other extra jobs, but when you specialize in something, you're going to be pretty good at it.
Did you have any problems staying with your family while you during your service?
Problems with what? I didn't hear that.
Staying in touch with your family. People.
Well, at first it was kind of difficult because in the 80s, during the 80s we had situations where people would have to send us care packages or mail. It basically a package in the mail.
Okay.
And in that mail package, you would have things like goodies from back home. We had a lot of tapes. Like at the time, any kind of entertainment like that was going on TV, we couldn't see any of that unless somebody sent us a tape, and we could see it all together in the berthings where all of the ship crew assembled. So.
Right. So
But
that was in.
That was it. That was before the advent of the internet and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So by that time, we started to be able to send videos back home. I sent a video to my son for his birthday. That got to him in a couple of days. So the technology definitely got better.
After you retired from the service, did you go back? Did you get another job, or did you just retire?
Well, I retired and got my master's degree right out of school. So I had a bachelor's. So I got a master's degree immediately after I retired. Right after that, I started my own business. I got my own LLC.
When you got out of the service, and so you got another degree.
Right. My
Right.
master's, in
You
business.
got your master's degree in what?
Business, MBA.
Business.
Got my MBA.
So did you start another career, or did you stay in retirement?
I had my own business, so I was doing things like that. I was doing some consulting and things of that nature, and I was had an online presence where I was making money on my own. But after that, I didn't, and I was working with an insurance company for a little bit. But after that, I just retired, and I still do some things. I still have my business available, and I'm doing a lot of things personally. I just got married and a few things other than that, but I plan to get back into that service environment that I was in when I had my business going well. But I was on the West Coast, so I got to reestablish it here and start from here. So that's what I'm doing now. Retired and just kind of, doing things with my fraternity because I pledged Kappa when I was at FAMU.
Gotcha.
So I do things with them, and I do some other things with the FAMU Alumni Association.
Okay. Did you use your GI Bill for your education?
I did.
Good. Okay. Okay, just two more questions and we're done.
Sure.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Yeah, it did. Because when you're in it, you hear a lot of things on TV about politics and all that kind of stuff, and then when you're out there actually implementing what the politicians are trying to get done, it's always better to be there and to see how your actions can affect different policy. And a lot of times we got to the point where we were disillusioned, like I said, with some of the SEALs. They were disillusioned with the fact that they would actually, the policy would change so much. You know, another regime would come in, they're going to change the policy they've been doing before. So that one instance where this one warlord could have been taken out, if the decision making would have been sound, I think that's something that should have been done. So I was very moved by that. And you know, when I went to the Navy SEAL Museum up in Fort Pierce, I saw they had an exhibit with that particular operation that we had gone through. I was like, man, I didn't know that operation we was involved with would make it here into a national museum. So, but that was policy directed stuff that caused that a lot of lives to be lost. So with that kind of thing, I looked at the fact that my military service was, you know, attached with that. So it kind of made you feel a little bit more responsible for what goes on.
Got it. And last question is, how did your service and experiences affect your life?
Discipline, being able to, like I said, lead others and help people solve their problems, and just my personal ability to make things happen I never thought I could make happen was very important, based on my military service.
And I just want to ask these guys, you guys got any questions for this gentleman? Everybody good? All right. Okay. All right. I want to thank you for your service, and I also want to thank you for a great interview.
All right, thank you.